Stop scrolling for 1 second and imagine this: a father standing in court, hands shaking, watching the woman he once loved laugh as the judge strips him of his son. 2 hours a week, supervised, monitored, like he is some kind of threat instead of the man who built the family brick by brick. He walks out carrying drawings instead of custody orders. But here's the part they never saw coming. Years later, the boy they kept from him walked back on his own. A late-night knock, a broken voice. "Dad, can I stay?" If you think you know how this ends, you don't. Watch to the final scene. The rain had been steady since dawn, Pacific Northwest kind of rain. Cold needles that found the seams of a coat no matter how tightly you pulled it around yourself. Mark Caldwell stood beneath the courthouse awning like a man about to be sentenced, tie slightly crooked, fingers numb, not from weather, but from the dread gnawing inside his ribs. His lawyer, Sarah Kim, murmured something about staying calm, about strategy, about how judges respond better to composure. Her voice was soft but distant, like radio chatter you hear mid-firefight when your ears are ringing. Mark only nodded, because what else could he do? When you have something to lose, you walk in. When you have everything to lose, you tremble. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, soulless, bureaucratic, the kind that washed faces pale and stripped humanity from the room. Laura sat at the petitioner's table, legs crossed like she owned the place, hair perfectly straightened, a pearl-white blazer without a single wrinkle. Her attorney leaned close to whisper something, and Laura laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a polite laugh, but the kind people use when they know they hold the knife. Mark could smell the coffee on her breath even from 20 feet away. Vanilla sweet, familiar. Familiar hurt more than anything. The clerk called the case. Chairs scraped. Papers shuffled like birds taking flight. Mark swallowed hard, throat tight as a noose. He placed his hands on the table, knuckles white, nails short, and chewed from months of stress. He had briefed cybersecurity teams under pressure, negotiated contract deadlines with developers who burned millions of dollars in a single quarter, but standing in front of Judge Williams felt like facing an encrypted firewall he could not breach. Laura spoke first. Of course she did. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "Mark is not an unfit parent. He is just uninvolved. He works too much. He forgets school events. He never posts pictures with Evan. I have been the primary caregiver. Full custody simply makes sense." People in the back row nodded. Someone even smiled. The courtroom smelled faintly of wet coats and disinfectant. Mark tried to speak. The words tangled. I do not. A stutter, a crack in the shield. Laura's attorney pounced. "He is barely a father," she said, voice sharp as broken glass. "Weekend visits should be enough." The sentence landed like a blow to the kidneys. Mark heard chuckles, small, private ones, but loud enough that humiliation crawled under his skin. Even the judge smirked, subtle but lethal, the way an instructor might when watching a recruit fumble his weapon in front of the platoon. Sarah whispered, "Stay calm, Mark. Do not react emotionally. Judges read emotion as instability." But his heart was already spiraling, code red, alarms blaring. He tried again. "I love my son. I have done everything I—" Laura scoffed, loud enough for everyone. "Love is not enough, Mark. Consistency is. He needs stability." Stability, a word like a financial report, a measurable metric. Something Mark used to track project budgets, not justify why he should be allowed to tuck his own boy into bed. Judge Williams leaned forward. "I am awarding full physical custody to the mother. The father will receive supervised visits, 2 hours, Sundays only. Review after 6 months." That was it. No battle, no appeal to humanity, just policy. Cold, clinical, final. Mark did not break, not here, not in front of them. But when the gavel hit the wood, the sound exploded inside him like a breach alert. Files disappearing, access revoked. Everything that mattered slipping beyond reach. He stood because his body remembered how, not because he wanted to. Papers rustled. Laura turned her chair slightly, just enough to let him see the victory in her eyes. He walked past her without a word. Rain waited outside like grief made weather. As he stepped into it, his tie loosened, his shoulders slumped. Gravity doubled. The world felt heavier than any load he had carried on a construction site. Behind him, laughter echoed faintly through the courthouse doors, warped by distance but unmistakably hers. He did not sob, he did not shout. He simply inhaled, slow and controlled, like a soldier bracing for the long march home after losing ground. Today, he lost his son. But storms do not last forever. Before courtrooms and custody filings, there was once a small house on a quiet street in outer Portland, the kind with wind chimes on porches and recycling bins left out longer than they should be. Mark Caldwell remembered that house like muscle memory. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, water heater older than both of them combined. They used to joke that the heater was like their marriage. Functional until one day it would not be. Back then, Mark worked nights managing infrastructure for a logistics company, the kind of job that required remote access at 2 a.m., eyes burning at the blue glow of code monitoring apps. He would patch vulnerabilities, reset hijacked credentials, audit firewall logs. Quiet work. Necessary work. Work that paid the mortgage and diapers and later karate classes Evan loved so much. He was the kind of man who solved problems before others knew they existed. Laura never saw that as love, just as labor. She wanted dinners out, trips, a new SUV instead of the old Tacoma with scratches from hauling drywall. She wanted the life her friends posted on social media, rooftop brunches, Napa Valley weekends, curated perfection. Mark wanted something humbler, a family that felt safe, not dazzling. Their arguments were never storms. They were slow leaks, drip by drip. "You barely look at me when you get home," Laura would say, arms crossed, mascara perfect even at midnight. "I just finished a 12-hour shift," Mark answered quietly, setting his badge on the counter like surrender. "Give me 5 minutes to breathe." "It is always 5 minutes," she snapped. 5 minutes turns into sleep on the couch. No affair, no clandestine lover. The betrayal was not in bedsheets, it was in tone, in comparisons, in the way she said his name like a disappointment she regretted buying. One evening, Mark sat fixing a loose cabinet hinge while Laura scrolled her phone, legs tucked under her on the sofa. Evan, 6 at the time, lay on the floor building a Lego tower. Rain tapped the windows. It could have been a good night. Laura glanced up and said casually, "Catherine's husband just got promoted again, senior finance director. They bought a lake house." She said it like weather, like harmless news. Mark tightened the screw a bit too hard. "Good for them," he said. She did not stop. "He makes real money. She is taken care of." The air between them chilled. Evan hummed softly, unaware. Mark wiped his palms on his jeans. "Are you not taken care of?" He meant it sincerely. Laura looked at him, really looked at him, and in her eyes he saw disappointment, not hunger for connection. "I want more, Mark. I want a life where I am not worried about bills. I am tired of stretching every dollar. I am tired of this tiny house." He could have told her how he lived spreadsheet tight, how he made budgets like tactical battle plans. No waste, no overspending, optimizing resources like a unit operating behind supply lines. But he only nodded, swallowed, and returned to the hinge. because sometimes silence feels safer than speaking. Over time, love became negotiation. Affection replaced with audits. She would leave bills on the table deliberately. Credit card statements like weekly reports. Interest like quiet accusations. Mark's chest tightened every time he opened them. Numbers do not lie, but they can wound. He took extra jobs, weekend contracting, fixing decks and framing basements. His hands split from cold lumber. His back stiffened from hauling boards upstairs. He would come home smelling of sawdust and exhaustion. Laura rarely thanked him. She would say, "You missed Evan's game again," or "We never go anywhere nice." He wanted to say he was building something long-term, security, foundation, legacy. She wanted something instant, glitter without construction dust. Love eroded not by disaster but by inspection. She did not cheat with another man. She cheated with comparison. Every time she held him up to someone richer, more polished, more successful, she carved away a piece of who he was. Mark still tucked Evan in at night, still whispered bedtime stories about soldiers who came home after long deployments, still believed fatherhood was not measured by photos online, but by being there in the quiet moments, the ones nobody else saw. But Laura was not looking for quiet. She wanted applause. When the separation came, it did not explode. It sighed. Papers signed in silence. Rings placed on the counter next to half-drunk coffee. Evan, asleep upstairs, unaware his world was splitting. And now, sitting alone after court, rain on his shoulders, Mark realized the cracks in their marriage were never sudden. They were architectural. Invisible to her, obvious to him, until the whole structure finally gave way under the weight of expectation. He lost the house. He lost the routine. Most painfully, he lost the right to tuck his son in. He walked to his truck, breath visible in cold air. He gripped the steering wheel and waited for his hands to stop shaking. Storms begin with clouds. This one began with comparisons. The visitation center smelled like old carpet and stale vending machine snacks. A place built for custody exchanges, not childhood memories. Cameras in every corner, lenses blinking red like watchful eyes. Mark Caldwell sat at a round plastic table, 2 hours every Sunday, precisely timed, logged, monitored. A schedule tighter than a security audit. No late check-ins, no extra minutes. Love, rationed like government supply. Evan would run to him, shoes squeaking on linoleum, arms small but fierce around Mark's neck. 11 years old now, too thin, hair a little longer than before. Mark breathed him in. Shampoo, crayons, a hint of childhood that courts could regulate but could not erase. On the second Sunday, Evan placed a folded paper in Mark's hands. "Look, Dad," he said, eyes bright like stars over a quiet lake. Mark unfolded it slowly. A drawing, 2 stick figures on a dock, one tall, one small, both holding fishing poles, water beneath them shaded blue with determination. A sun in the corner smiling like a child who believes things get better. Above it, in shaky pencil letters, "Me and Dad fishing again someday." Mark swallowed, throat tight as encrypted code. He placed the drawing into a manila folder inside his jacket like it was a classified document. Later, at home, he would slip it into a shoebox under his bed, the one he lined with drawings, ticket stubs, birthday cards. A vault only he opened when the loneliness grew heavy. Weeks turned into months, 2 hours at a time, segmented like data blocks. They played Uno. They built Lego spaceships. They talked about school, bullies, baseball practice. Mark gave Evan his jacket when he was cold, even though witnesses could see. He wanted the boy to remember warmth. Sometimes Evan asked questions that landed like artillery. Why can I not come to your house? Mom says you are too busy for me. Did I do something wrong? Mark never blamed Laura, even when truth burned his tongue. No, buddy, you did nothing wrong. Grown-ups just need time to figure things out. He said it calmly, evenly, like de-escalating a system under stress. Children deserve safety, not bitterness. Meanwhile, Laura's world sparkled online. Instagram stories of mimosa brunches, neon-lit rooftop parties, expensive dinners with people who looked like magazine covers. Her laughter recorded, her wine glass raised. Captions like self-care and living my best life. Evan rarely appeared in those posts. Mark scrolled late at night in his one-bedroom apartment, the glow of his phone harsh in the dark. He saw Evan sleeping alone in a photo once, iPad lighting his face. Laura commented something playful about boys and screens, but Mark noticed the absence, the lack of arms around him, lack of presence. A boy should not fall asleep to a screen. He should fall asleep to a voice reading stories in the dark. But courts do not track bedtime loneliness. They track income, stability, optics, metrics, numbers. Human softness gets redacted. On the 8th Sunday, Evan arrived quieter than usual. He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. A second drawing, this time a house with 2 windows lit. In one window, a woman with long hair, in the other a small boy looking out. Outside, the house stood a man under rain. "That is me," Evan whispered, "and that is you, waiting." Mark felt something inside him fracture. Not loud, but deep, like ice splitting beneath feet. He smoothed the drawing carefully, hand steady, because he had learned to hold pain like soldiers hold rifles, tight, controlled, no shaking. Evan leaned his head against Mark's arm. "I want to come home with you, Dad, even if it is small, even if you do not have a yard." Mark closed his eyes. In them, he saw plywood boards he measured last night for a side job. He saw budget spreadsheets, tax filings, legal invoices draining his account slow like blood. He saw his son asking something he could not grant. "Someday," Mark said softly, and he meant it like a vow. Outside the facility windows, winter rain streaked the glass. Vehicles in the parking lot blurred into watercolor. Life moved, uncaring. Mark wished he could freeze time, hack the system, rewrite access permissions. But real life does not grant admin rights easily. He walked Evan to the lobby when the timer beeped. 2 hours expired. Custodian-like staff watched, clipboards in hand. Evan hugged him tight, knuckles pressing into Mark's ribs as if trying to anchor himself. "I love you, Dad," he whispered. Mark bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted iron. "I love you more." Door closed, sun gone, week reset. He drove home in silence, shoebox waiting like a reliquary for another drawing. A father on borrowed time. But time has a way of shifting loyalties. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, while Mark was patching a compromised endpoint for a client. Just another task in another long week. The phone vibrated against the desk, screen lighting with the school's number. It was the kind of call that makes your stomach drop before you even answer. He removed his headset slowly, the hum of server fans fading as reality pressed in. "This is Principal Harding," a woman's voice said. Calm, professional. "We need you to come to Westview Elementary. Your son, Evan, was involved in an altercation." Altercation. Such a clinical word for childhood hurt. Mark drove faster than he should have, wipers fighting heavy rain, hands tight on the steering wheel. The sky outside was gunmetal gray, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it already was. He parked crooked, barely noticed the line, and pushed through the front doors. Floor smelling like wax and cafeteria pizza. They led him to a small office. Evan sat in a swivel chair, knees pulled to his chest, eyes red and swollen. A scraped knuckle, a smear of dried blood like rust. A boy trying to look brave, but failing in the most human way. Mark knelt in front of him without a word. The principal cleared her throat. He punched another student. We do not encourage violence, but the context matters. She lowered her voice. The other boy said you were not a real dad, that you only visit 2 hours a week. Mark felt something tighten, an old wound reopening slowly. He nodded once, steady. I understand. She left them alone. The door clicked shut. Evan looked up finally, lip trembling. Dad, I am sorry. Mark placed his large, calloused hand over Evan's smaller one. Do not apologize for protecting your heart. That was when the dam cracked. Evan leaned forward and buried his face in Mark's coat. Silent sobs first, shaking breath, warm tears seeping into fabric. Mark held him steady, like anchoring a rope in a storm. He stroked the back of Evan's head, not rushing, not speaking, letting the moment be what it was. A boy breaking. A father holding. Dad, I miss home, Evan whispered into the wool, voice so small, yet big enough to split the world. Home. The word hit Mark harder than any courtroom verdict. He had imagined this moment in quiet nights, sitting beside the shoebox of drawings like a soldier guarding relics of a lost war. But hearing his son say it, was something else entirely. It was not rage that filled him, but resolve. A slow-burning kind, like coals under snow. He leaned back enough to see Evan's face. Do you want to talk about it? Evan nodded. Mom goes out a lot. Rick is there sometimes, but he is always on his phone. They tell me to watch something or play games. I eat dinner alone a lot. Sometimes I fall asleep on the couch. Mark felt the breath leave him. He kept his voice measured, like negotiating a high-stakes contract. Calm on the surface, chaos underneath. And you feel lonely? Evan wiped his nose with his sleeve. Only when you are not there. Mark blinked slowly, grounding himself. No anger, no panic, just truth settling like snowfall. Everything the court ignored, warmth, presence, bedtime stories, had been a form of infrastructure they never measured. Love is not quantifiable, but absence is felt like failure logs flooding a server. He spoke with steady gravity. You matter to me, Evan, not part-time, not 2 hours, every day, every minute I'm alive. Evan's eyes shone. He hugged Mark again, tighter, and in that embrace, something wordless passed between them. A shift, a pivot. Not loud, but irreversible, like a firewall rule suddenly flipped, opening a path no one expected. Later, as they walked to the car holding hands, Mark noticed a chalk mural near the school gate. Children painted under a bright sun, all laughing. He thought of Evan's drawings, sticks on docks, dreams of fishing. He thought of Laura's photos. Wine glasses, city lights, curated smiles. 2 different worlds, one glittering, one real. He buckled Evan in and started the engine. Rain softened. Traffic hummed. Evan leaned his head against the window, exhausted, small. Mark stared ahead through the windshield, vision sharper than it had been in years. He knew then, clear as a breach report, that something in the foundation had shifted. The system would not stay the same forever. News of the school incident reached Laura within hours. Mark expected tension, maybe a difficult conversation. What he received instead was an ambush. Phone vibrating with a storm of texts, each one sharper than the last. You had no right to talk to him about home. You are poisoning him. You manipulated him. Do not think you are the hero here. By evening, she was at his door, rain dripping off her umbrella like acid. Rick stood behind her, expensive coat, jaw set like someone managing a corporate acquisition rather than a family crisis. Evan clung to Mark's hand, small fingers trembling. Laura pointed a polished nail at Mark's chest. "He punched a kid because of you. You fill his head with fantasy. You make him think you are something you are not." Mark kept his voice calm, like diffusing a volatile system. "I did not tell him anything. He came to me hurting." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You play caring father for 2 hours a week, then run back to your pathetic little apartment. You want sympathy? Try paying real bills. Try being present every day." Mark felt heat under his collar but controlled it, breathing slow, measured. "I am present every moment I can be. The court limited me, not my love." Rick crossed his arms, amused. "Maybe supervised visits are too generous." Something in Mark went cold. 2 days later, he received an email, subject line clinical. Motion to modify visitation. Attached were legal documents, thick as punishment. Laura claimed emotional manipulation, claimed Mark was destabilizing Evan, claimed he was interfering with her parenting authority. She wanted visits reduced. Again. Mark stared at the screen, fingers numb, like someone watching ransomware encrypt everything they valued in real time. He knew the process, hearings, statements, evidence. But evidence of love is not paperwork. It is drawings in shoeboxes and Wednesday tears in a school office. Courts do not archive those. In court, the room felt even colder than before. Laura arrived in a navy pantsuit, hair sleek, presence calculated. Rick sat behind her like moral support with a credit score. Their lawyer spoke confidently, like someone holding a winning stock. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell fosters false hope. He encourages the child to believe he will return to a home that does not exist. This creates instability and emotional confusion." Mark's chest tightened. Sarah, his lawyer, stood, but her voice felt smaller this time. "He is simply comforting his son. There is no evidence of manipulation." Laura cut in, smirk sharp enough to slice. "He is just a paycheck, not a parent." Gasps rippled through the courtroom like static. Mark froze. For a moment he did not hear anything. The words replayed like corrupted audio, distorted, cruel, just a paycheck, not a parent. Mark's knees felt weak. He kept his face still, jaw locked, eyes forward. He would not let them see him break. But inside, something cracked, not rage, but grief. The quiet kind that leaves a man hollow. Judge Williams adjusted his glasses, tone neutral, lethal. "Given the concerns presented, the court finds reason to limit contact until further assessment. Visitation is suspended pending evaluation. We will revisit in 90 days. 90 days, 3 months, a quarter of a year. Mark exhaled slowly, but it sounded like surrender. Sarah touched his arm, a soft gesture that felt like apology. Mark nodded numbly. He did not trust his voice. Laura turned to look at him as she collected her papers. Her smile was not wide, just enough to show she had won again. She whispered, barely audible, "Do not forget your place." Mark stood, legs heavy. The courtroom blurred around him. Voices muffled, movement sluggish, like he was underwater. He walked out alone, no one followed. Outside, rain fell harder. Traffic sprayed puddles onto the sidewalk. Mark did not move for a long time. He stared at the courthouse steps, feeling 20 years older. A soldier after a lost battle. A firewall breached. He reached into his coat, pulled out the folded drawing. Dad and me fishing again someday. The pencil lines blurred with rain. He held it anyway, protecting it with both hands like a relic. He was not angry. Not then. He was broken. And broken men do not scream. They rebuild in silence. The system won that day. But systems fail when they ignore what grows quietly beneath them. Time did what anger could not. It carved years into both of them. Evan's cheeks thinned, voice deepened, Lego towers replaced by textbooks and headphones. Mark watched from the margins, legally distant, emotionally anchored like a lighthouse no one visits, but everyone relies on when storms hit. Even after visitation was suspended, Mark never disappeared. He sent scheduled texts every week, short, calm, never desperate. "Good night, son. Proud of you today. Do not forget to eat breakfast." Sometimes there was a reply, sometimes nothing. Silence hurt, but silence is still presence if you stay. He mailed birthday cards even when they arrived unopened. Wrote letters, one each month, folded with patience, sealed with hope. He stacked them alphabetically in a drawer like archived logs, proof of effort no one awarded points for. On cold school mornings, Mark parked 2 blocks from the bus stop, just to hand Evan a warm breakfast sandwich through the cracked window. No scene, no guilt, just a father making sure hunger never felt like abandonment. Evan would take it shyly, earbuds dangling, eyes soft in a way that told Mark everything he needed. Years layered quietly, like sediment, like code-building systems no one notices until something breaks. Laura remarried during spring. Expensive ceremony, photographers, champagne flutes taller than promises. Her new husband, Rick, looked polished enough to belong in real estate ads. Tailored suits, Rolex catching light like success. Their house expanded. New kitchen, quartz counters, wine fridge, lifestyle upgraded. But something else shifted too. Coldness, sharp, efficient. Evan became part of the decor, present but unseen. Homework at the table, while adults laughed on speakerphone. Dinners eaten alone with microwave hum as background music. Mark heard pieces through short conversations, breadcrumbs of a boy growing up in absence. "Mom says I should not bother them during dinner. They talk business. Rick says I need to earn things. He took my guitar because my grades dropped. Sometimes I feel like furniture." Mark listened without flinching, without trashing Laura, without rescuing through anger, just being steady. A server up even when traffic spikes. Time moved like that, slow, unkind. Then one night the knock came, quiet, frantic. Mark was half asleep on the sofa, contractor tools stacked in the corner. He opened the door expecting no one. Evan stood there, hoodie-soaked, backpack hanging off one strap. 16 now, taller, eyes older than any child should be. Rain dripped from his hair onto the hallway floor. "Dad?" His voice cracked like something brittle finally snapped. "Can I stay? Just tonight?" Mark felt the moment like a seismic shift, fault lines realigning beneath their feet. He stepped aside without question. "Stay as long as you need." Evan exhaled, a sound part relief, part grief. He moved inside slowly, like someone entering sanctuary. Mark handed him a towel, heated leftover chili on the stove. They sat at the small kitchen table with mismatched chairs and peeling laminate. No luxury, no granite island, just warmth. Evan ate like he had not eaten properly in days. Mark noticed calluses on his fingertips from playing guitar alone, circles under eyes like unslept nights. He brewed chamomile tea, placed it beside the bowl without a word. When Evan spoke, it was soft. "Mom and Rick had people over. I asked for help with a project. Rick told me not to interrupt adults. Mom said I was dramatic. I just walked out." Mark nodded, slow, composed. "You are not dramatic for wanting to be seen." Evan looked up, eyes shining in the dim kitchen light. You always see me." Silence stretched, gentle instead of heavy. Rain tapped the window like memory. Mark felt something settle inside him, not victory, not revenge, but validation. He made a bed on the sofa. Evan fell asleep within minutes, curled like the little boy who once drew fishing docks. Mark stood there watching, father to son, witness to growth. He covered him with a blanket and sat on the floor beside him until dawn. No courts, no lawyers, no paperwork, just presence. Time, the true assassin, had finally turned its blade, not toward the father, but toward the illusion Laura built. The system may have won early battles, but life favors the patient. Evan stayed 3 nights, 3 quiet mornings of toast and scrambled eggs, of Mark driving him to school in the old Tacoma with the heater that took 10 minutes to wake up. Afternoons filled with simple routine. Homework at the kitchen table, guitar in the living room, Mark fixing dinner while Evan told stories he had held inside for years. It felt like a life stolen back in fragments. On the 4th evening, everything shattered. The pounding on the door was violent, fist against wood, no hesitation. Mark opened it to find Laura in full rage, hair wild from rushing, expensive coat soaked at the shoulders. Rick hovered behind her like a shadow dressed in cologne. "You kidnapped my son," she said, voice shaking with anger, not worry. "I am calling the police. You are violating custody terms." Mark stood in the doorway, posture calm, breathing slow, like stabilizing a system under DDoS assault. His voice was steady. "He walked here on his own. You know that." Evan appeared behind him, expression firm, shoulders squared like someone who had carried loneliness too long. He stepped to Mark's side, close enough that their arms brushed. "I want to stay here," Evan said, louder than Mark had ever heard him. "I am not a prop you can post online anymore." Laura blinked, stunned. Her anger flickered, fear behind it. "You are confused. Come home, now." "No." Evan lifted his chin. The boy who once held Lego bricks now held his ground like a young man. "If you force me, I will run again and again." Silence. Rain drummed the porch roof like war drums. Rick stepped forward, jaw tight. "You are being emotional, Evan. Your mother is your legal guardian. Do not embarrass her." Mark's pulse spiked, but he stayed composed. No shouting, no grand gesture. He placed a hand on Evan's shoulder, gentle, grounding. "He is not property. He is a person. You do not get to command his feelings like a business deal." For a moment, Laura's eyes wavered. Pride fought truth and lost. She called her lawyer anyway. 2 weeks later, they were back in the courtroom. The same sterile lights. The same wooden bench where Mark once felt like a ghost. But this time Evan sat beside him. Tall now, hair combed, suit jacket slightly too big. Hands calm, eyes clear. Laura, across the aisle, looked smaller. Not physically. Her blazer still expensive, makeup sharp, but something in her posture had diminished. She checked her phone too often, fingers fidgeting. The certainty she once wore like armor had cracks. The judge reviewed files without hurry. Pages flipped like time passing. Mark stared straight ahead, breathing controlled. No theatrics, no resentment. A quiet man, not defeated, simply present. "Evan," Judge Williams finally said, "you are old enough for your voice to carry weight. Tell me where you want to live." The entire room paused. Evan stood. His voice did not tremble. "I want to live with my dad, at least half the time. He listens. He notices when I am not okay. I do not need things. I need someone who sees me." Laura's lips parted in shock, a soundless gasp. Evan continued, eyes glossy but unwavering. Mom is busy. She has a new life. I am happy she is happy, but I am lonely there. I feel like background noise to their plans. With my dad, I feel real." The judge watched him for a long moment, the kind of silence that decides futures. Then he shifted his gaze to Mark, who held the moment with stillness, not triumph. "And you, Mr. Caldwell? Anything to add?" Mark shook his head gently. "No, Your Honor, my son said everything." It was not a strategy, it was truth. Judge Williams folded his hands. "Court grants joint physical and legal custody. 50-50, exchanges weekly. Counseling recommended." Gavel struck. A single sound, clean, final, like a lock opening instead of closing. Laura did not explode this time. She sat perfectly still, jaw tight, cheeks blotching beneath foundation. Humiliation not dramatic. Quiet, internal, heavy. Rick looked away, no longer the man with power and posture. Evan reached for Mark's hand. He squeezed back. Outside the courthouse, the sky was bright for once. No gray, no rain. They walked down the steps slowly. Mark felt sunlight warm his face. It did not feel like victory. It felt like breathing after years underwater. Laura stood near the bottom, clutching her purse like a life raft. When they passed, she whispered raw and quiet, "This is not over." Mark paused, not to argue, but to meet her eyes with a calmness she could not break. It never had to be a war. He turned to Evan, ready to go home? Home. A word rebuilt. They walked to the old Tacoma, father and son side by side. No court could measure that. Years moved the way mountains erode, silent, patient, irreversible. Evan grew taller than Mark, shoulders broad from football, hair tied back occasionally with careless confidence. The boy who once drew fishing docks now applied to colleges with essays about resilience, and quiet fathers who show love without speeches. On graduation day, the stadium buzzed with folding chairs and cheap plastic horns. Sunlight cut clean lines across the field, catching flecks of gold in the air like dust suspended in time. Parents waved signs. Teachers smiled through exhaustion. It smelled of sunscreen and summer grass, of endings and beginnings. Mark sat 3 rows from the front, hands folded, suit slightly out of fashion but ironed with meticulous care. He looked older, lines deeper, beard speckled with gray, but he carried a peace he never had in the courtrooms. No tremor, no fear, just presence. When Evan's name was called, students cheered. He walked the stage with steady steps, cap tassel swinging. When he took his diploma, he glanced toward the crowd, not scanning, not searching. He looked straight at Mark and smiled. A smile that said, "We made it through." Ceremony ended in a flurry of camera shutters and hugs. Families clustered like data packets in busy network traffic. Mark stood waiting, no rush, letting others reach their children first. When Evan finally walked to him, the boy did not shake his hand or pose stiffly for a photo. He stepped into Mark's arms and held him, long, firm, unashamed. Mark closed his eyes, inhaling the moment like oxygen after years spent underwater. He had imagined this embrace 1,000 nights alone. Reality felt softer, realer. Evan's voice near his ear, low and steady. "Thank you for never leaving, even when they tried to make you." Mark's throat tightened. "There was never a version of life where I walked away." They pulled back, both blinking more than needed. Emotion does that to grown men. No theatrics, just eyes shining heavier than words. Laura stood farther off near the bleachers, alone. Not poorly dressed, not broken, but smaller somehow. Like someone living inside the echo of choices she could not undo. She walked toward them slowly, heels sinking slightly into the turf. Her face held something Mark had never seen from her in court. Softness. When she reached them, she spoke gently, voice stripped of weaponry. Maybe we can rebuild. Not like before, but all of us. There was hope in her tone, but also uncertainty. Regret threaded through like static. She looked at Evan, not with ownership, but a quiet plea. Years had weathered her too, not by time alone, but by what time revealed. Evan gave a polite nod, kind but not eager. Healing is not instant. It is negotiated like fragile peace. Mark looked at his son, laughing with friends now, cap tilted sideways, sunlight catching on the edge of his jawline. Young, alive, unburdened. A future built not from revenge but from steady love. Mark felt something settle inside him. Closure, not triumph. He turned to Laura, tone calm, measured. "You had something precious," he said. "No anger, just truth. You let rage use it like trash. Now he chooses where love feels real. No raise of voice, no venom. Just a verdict time delivered, not courtrooms." Laura exhaled, quick, shaky. She nodded once, tears gathering but refusing to fall. Pride and regret wrestled behind her eyes. She stepped back, not defeated, but aware. Mark walked toward Evan again, toward sunlight, toward laughter. They moved through the crowd side by side, diploma in hand, future unfolding like open road. The old Tacoma waited in the parking lot, dented door, reliable engine. Familiar, home. Mark tossed Evan the keys. "You drive." Evan grinned. Finally. They pulled away slowly, windows down, summer wind filling the cab. Laura stood watching from a distance, a silhouette framed in memory, not in Mark's path. He did not look back, not from cruelty, from freedom. Father and son drove toward a small life with big heart, cheap coffee, weekend fishing trips finally real, no cameras, no supervised hours. Just time, shared freely, no trophies, no audience. Just two men, whole again. Fade out on sunlight glinting off the metal of an old truck, carrying them forward. Not victorious, but free. In the end, this was never just a story about courtrooms, custody papers, or who won on paper. It was about the quiet endurance of a father who refused to stop loving his son, even when the world told him he had no place. Mark did not fight with anger. He did not seek revenge. He simply remained, patient, steady, present, until the day his child found his way home on his own terms. It reminds us that love is not always loud. Sometimes it is the gentle persistence that survives storms, time, and distance. If you stayed with this story until the end, take a moment to breathe, reflect, and let this be a reminder that patience can rebuild what pain once shattered.